Hi, welcome and thanks for joining us. Today I'd like to share with you a little bit about the Melissa Roberts Foundation and tell you firstly who we are, what we do, but more importantly why we do it. My name is Bruce Roberts and I'm the chair of the Melissa Roberts Foundation. This is one module of two modules in this introductory series, and it's a lead into a whole set of videos that we are producing on training around voices and paranoia, which I hope you will look at some point in time. So who's the Melissa Roberts Foundation? Well, the foundation was founded back in 2011, about 14 years ago. It's a not-for-profit health promotion charity registered with the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profit Commission. But mainly we promote recovery through skills and techniques developed by people with lived experience of hearing voices and paranoia. So what we're doing here is we're working with people who actually have recovered, people who've walked their journey and experienced the traumas, have experienced the lows, and the disempowerment of being controlled by voices or overcome by their paranoia, and have found ways and tools and strategies to work through it to a position where they feel that they are now recovered or in recovery, or in a situation where they can lead what would be considered to be a normal life. So we very much focus on lived experience. When we talk about lived experience, again, we focus on these issues: hearing voices, paranoia, and childhood trauma. They are a cocktail that we find is very prevalent in situations where, for example, people hear voices, they often experience paranoia. But more importantly, we find that with people who hear voices, almost in every case, there is a traumatic event or events in their life history which has been consistent with the onset of the voices. Paranoia, perhaps not as much with trauma, but we find that in most cases, trauma plays a major role in this situation, and we'll talk more about that in other videos we produce. Our vision is a society that fosters hope, recovery and equality for people with a mental illness. Cliche, but what we believe in is that everyone can recover. It's possible for everyone to recover. We've seen people who have been considered to be throwaway cases in terms of lock them up and throw the key away, or that person's lights went out years ago. Well, we've seen those people walk the journey of recovery and come out the other end. One of my presenters, who I'll introduce you to in Module 2, Peter Bullimore, is very much a person in that category, a person who was within the mental health system for 10 years and regarded as someone who had very, very little opportunity for recovery. Well, he's a world-leading authority on the subjects of paranoia and voices now, and he travels the world training, teaching psychiatrists more effective ways to work with voices and paranoia. So the recovery is very possible, and that's why we chose that very simple but real statement as far as our vision. So why do we do what we do? Firstly, there's a huge gap in dealing with these experiences in mainstream mental health. Again, working with people with lived experience, we've found the frustrations of people in that situation who just can't get the care that they need around voices and paranoia. They're very much misunderstood, and many people in clinical environments just don't have the right tools to work with, and we found that is one of the main problems. We've found that people in clinical environments and in mental health services often look at people and treat them based on their behaviour, and that's incorrect. They need to look at why people react the way they do. So you don't look at the behaviour, you look at what caused the behaviour. And psychiatry is not about what's wrong with you, it's about what happened to you. Everybody has a story, everybody has a journey, and you need to peel back the layers and look at what it is that took people to that situation and created that environment where they're disempowered by these experiences. It's also important to remember that everything that happens to people has happened due to some event in their life, and it's important that you actually look at the circumstances around that. We also, Foundation, we also like to think that we are in synergy with what's known as the World Hearing Voices movement, and there's a movement that exists in 30 countries over 5 continents. We aren't part of that in a structural sense, but we're certainly part of it in the sense of we express and agree with their ethos and philosophy, which is simply, in terms of voices, is to look at voices as a complex and significant and meaningful event in life that should be explored, rather than a symptom of an illness that should be ignored. So that's the first reason, but the main reason why the foundation exists is because of this young lady. Melissa Roberts. Melissa Roberts is my daughter. The foundation was set up in dedication to our daughter, to my daughter Melissa. Mel passed away in 2010. Mel suffered voices severely. She suffered the torment of paranoia, and she also suffered the torment of severe depression. All these were too much and overcame Mel in 2010. Mel's story is available on the website. It's quite graphic, but I suggest that if you are able, you should have a read. It's not a story of hope because of Mel's tragic end, but it does give a good insight into a journey through madness. I would encourage people to, not just people with lived experience, but I would encourage people who work with voice hearers to read it and to absorb what it all means. And I suggest you do that safely, perhaps with somebody else. Mel is an inspiration of everything we do. There's always this belief that people who are troubled or have conditions tend to be quiet and reserved and don't talk about it. It's not always the case. That was not Mel. Mel was a high extroverted person. She was well-liked, very social. She was a highly accomplished sports person, public speaker, Toastmasters. She was dux of a school in 2001. But the realities that we found with Mel is that, and we go back to the trauma issue. Mel suffered a major trauma at age 14, but we didn't know about it. We didn't find out until she was 19 or 20. Now, Mel took that trauma when she was 14 and she opened up the box, she stuck the box, put the lid down and she nailed it down, pushed it under the table, never to be opened again. She got on with her life, and as her achievements were significant, leading up to her successful HSC result. Now, unfortunately for Mel, when the HSC finished, another tragedy occurred, not to her but to a very close friend. And what happened then is the box opened and the trauma was out, and Mel went from being top of the tree to being the person most likely to succeed, as written in her yearbook at year 12, to a revolving door patient in the mental health system within 3 to 6 months. And Mel went through that process for a whole 9 years. And essentially, you know, I say this with respect, but I have to say it, that the system failed Mel. And when I say that, there were a lot of very, very good people that worked with Mel in that 9 years. Excellent people, devoted, dedicated people who tried their hardest to help Mel. What they lacked, of course, was they didn't have the right tools to work with. And essentially, nothing that they did was helping, and in many cases, it hindered. Medication played a big part in that situation, and I'll talk more about medication in other modules. But it's certainly the system and the tools they work with didn't help Mel's situation in that circumstance. So let's talk a bit about what we do. Well, essentially we provide support, information, training and education in the areas of voices, paranoia, and their links to childhood trauma. In regards to support, we offer that to obviously people with lived experience. We offer it to carers. We find often that the carers need that support. Having been a carer myself, I know that you can become very lonely and isolated in that role, and you need support. So we make that a priority in our work, that we actually offer support for carers. We also offer to peer workers and anyone else essentially who needs support. We find that often we get calls from people like school counsellors who have a student that's experiencing voices or paranoia, and they can't seem to get the answers they want out of mainstream mental health, mainly because those people are probably too young to be assessed properly in that situation, or their parents may not want them to be. So they come to us and ask us, you know, what can we do, and we provide as much safe advice as we can to help them move forward. Information, well, our website has a plethora of information and resources that are free and downloadable for people on all topics on voices and paranoia. And so I encourage people to go onto our website, again, melissarobertsfoundation.org.au, and access those tools and resources as best you see fit. And if you have any questions, you can always come back to the foundation. Training, that's our biggest activity. Our operational activity is training. We do a lot of workshops around voices and paranoia. And we also do presentations to non-government and government organisations just as a feed-in to give them some insights into the experiences. And education, well, again, we do presentations and outreach. We are now trying to get into a situation where we can get into the school environment, educational environment. We've done a bit of work with universities. We now want to get into the school environment so we can tap in. And we know that there's lots of voice hearers and people with paranoia in the school environment, and because there's such a high stigma around hearing voices and paranoia, they don't disclose. So there's a lot of people living out there, young people who aren't coping very well, who need help. So we're trying now to get into that educational environment where we can get in at the bottom end scale, so we can help those young people who may have been like Mel at age 14 and don't know where to turn. So a little bit more on our workshops and presentations, broken down into the three categories of voices: paranoia and childhood trauma. We have 13 modules in the Hearing Voices series, so they're quite extensive. They range from 2-hour presentations up to half-day workshops to full-day workshops to 2-day workshops. So there's a whole range there, and again, visit our website and you'll see what we have to offer. We offer them online and face-to-face. The majority of the Voices modules are offered face-to-face, but some of them are online as well or instead of. In regard to paranoia, we have 4 modules, but they're all online, and we have 2 modules for childhood trauma. Again, they are online. So a bit more about the foundation. This is a snapshot of our website and about. We've talked about the foundation and Mel's story. We'll talk a little bit more about the Dragonfly in a minute because it is significant. Our mission, our values, our aims and purposes, committee, strategic planning, our constitution, they're all there for people to view to see exactly what drives us and how we're structured. Areas of activity, voices. Now we separated voices and youth hearing voices because there is a subtle difference in the way that you work with people. There are a lot of different groups. We wouldn't run a self-help group for voices for people under 18 as well as people who are adults, so we'd separate them and always have it because there are subtle differences. Paranoia, childhood trauma. We used to do a lot of fundraising a few years back, but it's only a very small part of our activity. One of our largest and most growing parts, of course, now is our self-help groups, and these are around hearing voices experience, but also paranoia. And essentially these are peer-led groups, and again, I have a number of workshops or videos on that particular subject that you can delve into, but they've been proven worldwide to be very successful. And I would recommend that someone who's troubled by their voices and is looking for some community-based availability to help them move forward, look for a self-help group. Go onto our website and see what's around. So we've reached over 3,000 people in the 12 to 14 years that we've been doing this training and work. We like to think that we have managed to help some people move forward. We've had some really good feedback as to from workers and even carers about people who've been to our workshops and have enjoyed the outcomes and have been able to use some of that experience to take forward to help their person they love or help the person they support or work for. So people with lived experience, mental health professionals, carers and families, educators, peer workers, social workers, all those people have value to be added to their work environment by being in part of that process. Now let's talk a bit about the dragonfly, which I mentioned before. You'll notice on my shirt that there's a dragonfly symbol, and you may have noticed on the opening slides that there was dragonflies. I've got dragonflies on my wristbands. And so why is that? Well, when Mel was very young, she used to have a strong affinity with dragonflies. We never understood why, but she was always fascinated and got very excited when a dragonfly came around. It was only after Mel passed that we actually got ourselves in a situation where we learned a bit more about what is a dragonfly. And we were quite surprised to see how symbolic a dragonfly was. And things like light, courage, resilient, change, strength, power. All these things were very prominent in the symbolic aspects of the dragonfly. And they have very strong synergy with what we consider to be essential elements of a person to walk that recovery journey. So it's very, very pertinent and relevant to what we do. So it's a very big part of who we are. This little guy over here, he's called the Blue Dasher. And, he's is a beauty. So that's a snapshot of the Melissa Roberts Foundation, about who we are. I hope that's been insightful. So that's the end of this module. If there's any part of this, after viewing this video, if any of the content has made you feel uncomfortable, or more so that you feel like you need some intervention or support, if you're in Australia, please contact Lifeline on 131 114, or certainly a family member or a friend to support you if you aren't feeling well. If you're coming from outside of Australia, if you're watching this video from other countries, please look at your own support mechanisms in your country, but don't be alone. Always look for support if you're feeling uncomfortable. So thanks very much, and bye for now.